If you were to recommend that Google deprecate a product in their portfolio, which would you recommend and why? Hey, everybody, and welcome to another mock interview with Exponent. Today, I'm here with Mariel. Let's hear a little bit about you, Mariel.
Hi, nice to meet you. So my name is Mariel. I currently work at SoFi as a business lead for the core app experience. But previously, I used to work in BizOps at Google, which is a very hot topic these days because there's a lot of different types of business operations and strategy roles. The way that Google works is typically the main BizOps group functions as an internal consulting group for the company and is
Hmm.
deployed to different parts of the product experience.
Hmm.
So you can be in ads, you can be in like Waymo, you can be in internal operations, you can work for different special projects. Generally speaking, it's really interesting because business operations and strategy can take a lot of flavors depending on where you go. And
Hmm.
typically it all follows the similar kind of strategy management consulting kind of pattern, but it always looks different. Like I can tell you for a fact, SoFi is very different than Google in a lot of ways, which just makes it
Yeah.
exciting. But excited to chat through a Google experience.
Awesome. All right, let's get started. If you were to recommend that Google deprecate a product in their portfolio, which would you recommend and why? And walk me through how you would set up a project to answer this.
Yeah, great question. So I think this is one where it's always really challenging to kind of tackle this this is an aside as in an interview when you're talking to a team that launched a product. But I
Yeah.
think the biggest thing I would say is like Google Shopping. So again, switching modes into the interviewee, Google Shopping specifically is the one I'm going to choose for a couple of different reasons. So, and then I'll walk you through how I got there. So my rationale is really the space is really have it's really competitive today with TikTok Shop, with Amazon, eBay. There's countless kind of shopping platforms out there. I
Yeah.
really think it's a pretty competitive space, but one that Google I think has a really fragmented user experience in compared to other platforms. It's not quite as seamless as like an Amazon or even I hate to say it as a TikTok Shop type of thing. If you've ever used it yourself, it is helpful for finding different platforms for these products, but at
Yeah.
the same time there's limited really differentiation and it hasn't been innovated in the past I would say like 5-10 years.
Hmm.
And that is not at all a ding to Google specifically. It's just not where I would say that their focus has really excelled in the past couple of years, even with the strides they've made in AI, for example. I
Hmm.
think that Amazon especially has just really made monumental strides since the pandemic in optimizing their user experience, making it seamless, being able to compare across, vendors, across products, recommended products in a way that Google Shopping just hasn't really been able to keep up.
Yeah.
But okay, so switching to kind of structuring a project around this, if I were to have a project team, I would do definitely phase one would be data collection analysis. Want to read as much as possible on this, both internally and externally.
Hmm.
Two, I would definitely want to make sure I consult all the teams that work with and or on Google Shopping. Obviously, if I'm going to propose deprecating, that's a pretty big and heavy lift
Yeah.
to just across the organization. I would want to make sure I hear their opinions and also external stakeholders, their take on what this would mean. Obviously, you have to think about the street and things like that when you think about a public organization. I would then do a cost benefit analysis, and I'll go into detail of all of these. And then at the end, I would follow up with like a risk assessment and really understand what would be the biggest risks to doing this, what are the pros and cons, again weighing those cost to benefit analysis and that risk assessment, and then
Hmm.
obviously find an implementation plan if we do decide to deprecate it.
Yeah.
So zooming back into that phase one, so I think data collection, what I would first and foremost just do as much market and customer research as possible. Like think about all the market trends that are going on, customer feedback, look at any NPS or user satisfaction scores, pain points, anything that kind of the user is kind of saying online about us through our own internal survey to feedback tools or even just sentiment analysis online. I think those are really powerful tools just to say, like, you could probably Google Shopping and probably get some pretty strong words one way or another.
Yeah.
And then I would be in contact with the Google Shopping team and the data analytics team at Google and say, hey, give me, let's better understand your user engagement, your transaction volume, what's been the growth trends over the past 5, 10, 15 years, and really assess overall, like how much revenue is this driving for the business? I know from firsthand experience that, your margins on shopping are pretty small, especially when you're a search engine. So Google has so many other valuable business units that it runs. It would be really interesting to see how much of that contribution profit from Google Shopping
Yeah.
is it a big drop in the bucket or is it a small drop in the bucket?
Yeah.
After kind of doing that, I would kind of then pivot to talking to stakeholders. So I would first talk to internal stakeholders across the team. Would definitely want to make sure I talk to product managers, engineers, marketing teams, and really understand what their challenges are with the product, because maybe it's something we can pivot. Maybe it's not something we have to deprecate entirely.
Yeah.
And so would really want to understand, what their perspective is on deprecating it in a sensitive way, as sensitive as possible. Obviously, there's some sensitivity around doing things like this
You
in
avoid
this
the D
environment.
word as much as possible. You're like,
Absolutely.
we're just
So,
making a
so,
chat
so
here.
tricky. Exactly. And so I think it would be really interesting also to talk to kind of more objective third parties in the company. So I'm thinking like the corporate finance team, even the accounting organization, the IR relations team, who are all closely sat, embedded with the business operations team. They sit in, adjacent departments. I think it would be really valuable to see what do they think about the product. And you'll actually hear a lot from the investor relations teams at a business that they are ones that actually have a great kind of pulse on what the value is of a certain product or a certain division, more than maybe other groups, just because they hear a lot from external parties.
Mm.
And so I think that would actually be a nice segue to say, okay, you know what? I am going to try to interview a few external stakeholders if I can, whether it be customers, whether it be merchants that sell products via Google Shopping, that advertise with Google Shopping, just to see what is their outlook on it. I mean, I know for example, for myself, I am a shameless Aritzia shopper. I love Aritzia. And I know that the Google shopping experience for Aritzia, when you search a certain product, is pretty clunky. Even the recommended products, it kind of does a lot of, it recommends products that are related, but not quite the best. So I would love to talk to them to say, hey, is this something that actually is driving conversion for you guys? Is this something that is totally worthwhile or something that
Right.
is a little bit challenging to work with?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that way you could kind of build out that both internal and external perspective.
Gotcha. Okay.
Um, but yeah, it's a really challenging world. And so I think after kind of taking a step back, looking at that market research that you've put together, hearing those perspectives, I would want to do then really pivot to the kind of the harder data side of the world and look at the cost benefit analysis, really run the numbers on the operational costs. Obviously, there's a lot of sensitivity when doing this internally, but I think it is really important to say, hey, what are the operational costs? How many people are working on this? How many people, like how many engineering squads, how many
Yeah.
product managers, marketing teams, et cetera. And then, because hopefully I've already talked to corporate finance before, kind of evaluate those, direct and indirect revenue streams from Google Shopping. I
Yeah.
imagine that, again, the margin hopefully isn't major to Google, and I would hope I would find that to continue with my proposal. But if we do find somewhere along the way that it is really valuable, then we can actually just, go ahead and hopefully build the case for deprecating it. And then I think the last piece of this cost benefit analysis that's a little tricky that you definitely want to keep in mind is opportunity costs. So if you were to deprecate this, where would those funds go? I know if I was deprecating this today, or if I was recommending this to Google today, I would say double down on your AI search engine, on Gemini, on Smart Compose, and keeping up with the Microsofts of the world, the OpenAIs of the world. But you definitely want to take that into account. It may not be like a hard finance number, but it is something that's very worthwhile when you kind of look at
Yeah.
it holistically.
Yeah.
And in doing so, I think you also kind of, that leads really nicely into like the risk assessment piece. Like, so who's going to be really affected if we were to turn this off? Obviously, that's not how it happens, but what if we were to turn it off? What would be the user impact? How many users would just not engage with us anymore? Are there any ones that wouldn't engage with us anymore? Is it a reputation, potential issue? Could there be merchants that have backlash that really, have strong words for Google because they are no longer doing this?
Mm.
And are there also any alternative solutions that we can propose at Google? So, for example, while I would recommend deprecating Google Shopping, definitely not Google Ads. Google Ads runs Google. It is by far the biggest revenue generator for the company. So I think that would be something I would propose. I could go to the large department stores of the world and say, hey, we might be deprecating Google Shopping, but we will be able to, onboard X amount more advertisements in the coming year for you across search engines. And I think that could be a really compelling case, but also getting a pulse check on what people's perceptions are of those alternative solutions, I think would be really important, both internally and externally. And after that, I would kind of like take a step back, look at all of the findings. If all of the things kind of pointed towards, I shouldn't say all of the things, but a majority of the things kind of pointed towards that alternative solutions and deprecation of the product, I would kind of strategically structure those in a nice presentation, a nice PowerPoint, and present those recommendations to the executive team.
Okay.
But at the end of the day, if it wasn't something that, if it we proved it to be actually valuable, you could obviously take a step back. But I think that after kind of doing all of those steps, I think you'll find that Google Shopping probably is not the best investment in Google's time and resources today. And
Hmm.
then obviously from there, you have to develop an implementation plan. What's going to happen? Inform users, inform merchants, inform customers, Google employees across the board. It's a
Yeah.
very sensitive subject. So you're going to want to make sure you navigate that smoothly
Hmm.
and just provide support throughout the entire process.
Yeah. Yeah. Safe to say that like deprecating a product is not the easiest step to
No,
take
no.
emotionally or just logistically. It's a huge undertaking. So
Huge undertaking. And it's something that Google has done a couple of times in their history. And it's interesting
yeah.
because I think every time that they've done it, even when I think about like Google Plus, which, that social media platform they
Oh
used to
yeah.
have,
My God, that was
which,
ages
yeah,
ago.
right. It was a while ago, but it's still like talked about at Google. It's honestly one of the biggest like learnings as an aside, as we used to have there is like studying what kind of went wrong.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because you can find a lot of learnings from what went wrong, but also a lot of increased innovation as a result of it. So like people, streamline their product portfolio. So now, Gmail looks a lot cleaner without your little, plus profile.
Yeah.
Apologies to
Yeah.
anyone who used it, but and it focuses on the core products. It allows you to kind of really double down on what matters. And I think at a massive organization like that, you really need to double down on what really matters.